Good afternoon. I'd like to start off by saying that my name's Bishop Dr. Peter James from the UK. I'm actually the founder of Christian Warriors for God, which is the world's largest Christian internet church charity. The purpose of this brief session is to talk to you about my own testimony, hopefully so that some of you will understand a little bit more about me. The story is a story of God's grace. God's grace given to me on several occasions throughout my life. And I'm calling this particular session part one. I'm calling it the wilderness years, to talk about the beginning of my life. I came from a fairly normal working class family. My father was a military man. There wasn't a great deal of love in our family. I never saw my father cuddle my mother or tell her that he loved her. My discipline was pretty strict. And in fact, by the time I was 15, I was sent off to boarding school with the idea that at 18 I would probably leave and join the army, just like my father had done. But that wasn't to happen. At 18, in fact, I left boarding school and joined the police force. I became a police officer, and I did that for 5 years. It was a very large British city police force, without naming names. And I have to tell you that I saw things in there that absolutely shocked me. I saw dishonesty, I saw corruption, I saw a variety of things. And during this time, I started to drink fairly excessively, as most policemen seem to do. Drinking and driving at the time didn't seem to be a problem to any of us. I slowly got drew in to the darker side within the police force. And after 5 years, I realised that I was getting myself into serious trouble and I needed to get out. So I did. I left. Then things started to go downhill fairly fast. Initially, I couldn't afford to find anywhere to live. In the police force, they give you your own accommodation. So I stayed with friends. And then when I outgrew that and they outgrew my bad behaviour, things just went from bad to worse. I call them the wilderness years because I was a wild man. I mean, I was a bad boy. During that time, my life was really one of fighting, street fighting, brawling in the street, brawling in pubs, drinking excessively, stealing, cheating, scamming. It was not a good way to live. I eventually ended up living in the squat, and the squat is a place where people who don't have a home break into an empty house and live there. I lived there with, I think, about 16 other people. And they allowed me to live there on the grounds that I went out every day and stole food for them to eat of an evening, which I used to do. I was quite good at it because as an ex-policeman, I knew where the cameras were and I knew the bits that couldn't be seen by the cameras. And they tended to be the foods that I stole. I also stole drink, of course, because by now I need to drink every day in my life. We got evicted from that place, and I found myself literally homeless. I found myself living on the streets. Got myself a sleeping bag and as many blankets as I could. And that's where I stayed. And occasionally I managed to get a night into one of the homeless hostels. I knew where the places were to get free food. And that's how I used to live. In between that, of course, I carried on with whatever criminal activity I could carry on with. It's all a bit jumbled because we are going back nearly 50 years. My living on the streets became pretty rough. I had a particular episode where I had one night in a hostel and two men thinking, I got up to go to the toilet and two men thought they might try and rape me. Big mistake. Big mistake. I mean, there was so much anger in me. By the time I'd finished with them, one was unconscious. I had been stamping on his head for a minute or two. And the other was bleeding so profusely and crying and sobbing and asking me not to hit him again. I was covered with blood. I left the hostel quick because I knew the police were going to turn up fairly fast. I went on from there to get a job as a doorman or a bouncer in a brothel. Yeah, a brothel. My job was to protect the girls from the punters. And being the kind of man I was more than capable of doing that. Now, that lasted for nearly 2 years. The advantage I had of that job is they allowed me to sleep there. But seeing as they worked till all hours in the morning, I was kind of available if they needed help. We got closed down. I found myself back on the streets and winter was approaching, and I found myself seeking somewhere warm to sleep of a night time. And the only place I could find was a public toilet in a bus station. So I spent nearly 4 months sleeping in the toilets with my bottle of whiskey every night. And in the day, just going out begging, scamming, looking to cheat or steal. I was effectively unemployable. One day, in total desperation, I was in my toilet cubicle. I got down on my knees in front of the toilet and I raised my hands to I don't know what. But I remember saying something like, if there is a God in this world out there, then I need you, and I need you now in my life. Something strange happened. I physically felt an enormous weight being lifted from my shoulders. An enormous weight. And little did I know at the time, my life was about to change. Now, that's the next part, which I'll come to. But suffice to say that when I came out of the toilets, I bumped into a man who was a Christian man, who took me home, who fed me, who got me baths, whose wife made up a spare bed for me. And they kept me there for a few days because I'd stopped drinking by this stage. And when you've been drinking as long and as hard as I have, the withdrawals are quite difficult to deal with. And they helped me through. And this man actually got me into a hospital where I received some help. That's 10 minutes. That's enough for today. In my next session, I'll talk about another stage. This time, I won't refer to them as the wilderness years, but I'll refer to them from rags to riches and describe what happened next. It's been good. I have shared this testimony into various groups. It's been good to have the opportunity to share it on video. God bless you all. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen.